There's a new proposed settlement that could keep Florida State and Clemson in the ACC for at least another 6 years. Would this be a win-win?
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers, and thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free three-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On this episode, we'll talk about possible weekend upsets in the ACC. I want to talk about this proposed settlement. Who wins? Who loses? Who has the most to gain by this? Because Kenton Gibbs, bombshell earlier this week. Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, others are now reporting, I don't know who leaked this, maybe the ACC, that they're talking about a settlement that would involve the ACC actually shortening their grant of rights to finish in 2030 rather than 2036, while also adjusting their payout structure to pay their member universities. Part of that pot would go based on your television ratings and your media worth, rather than an equal split or even a strictly competitive split. So what was your reaction when you saw this bombshell dropped?
I mean, are we really surprised by this is my question, right? Like, objectively speaking, has the ACC not already capitulated to the bigger brands and the bigger names coming up with a tiered system for, if you accomplish these things, you'll get more and da-da-da. And as we see, those teams are struggling to accomplish those things. The
success initiative, not very successful, some of these teams on the field. One of them is specific.
Yikes. But in all seriousness, you kind of look at that as your first thing there. And then on top of that, you say to yourself, if you are talking from the ACC standpoint, this absolutely guarantees you stability at least through the next 6 years. It grants you that. It guarantees you that through the next 6 years. But from the ACC standpoint, again, what is to stop these teams from suing you again in 2 to 3 years if the deal doesn't look right? They have shown a propensity to sign a contract and then say, actually, I don't like the terms of what I signed. Because if I am correct here, did Florida State and Clemson not sign the grant of rights twice? 2 times. So it wasn't like a one-time deal way back in 2000 and they got in this deal in perpetuity and they found themselves in a lifetime deal. This was something that was looked at, reviewed. Your people looked over it and said, you know what? We're going to do it. Not once, but twice in the very recent past. So, I mean, objectively speaking, I'm looking at this and I'm saying you can try and you can fight and you can scream and you can claw and you can say, hey, we'll give you more, we'll give you more, we'll give you more. But at some point in time, the rubber's going to meet the road and the reality is going to meet the reality that these teams don't want to be here regardless.
That's well said. I hadn't even thought of that. Like, again, like I would assume that like part of the settlement would be you promise not to sue us again, but that doesn't mean they already, like you said, they already signed the grant of rights and they're still suing. So that doesn't really guarantee anything. Now, another way that I look at this proposal, and we'll talk about what it would take to actually get this to pass, right? I see, people who are like blind ACC homers who are like, this is a win for the ACC, and FSU is 0-3, so they're humbled now. I see people on the Florida State side who are like, well, this is what we wanted. This is a win for us. We proposed this 2 years ago to have the payout model based on TV ratings, right? The bottom line, Kenton, is both sides would be giving something up here.
Yes.
Both sides.
Yes.
And this would definitely show you there has got to be fear from an ACC point of view and fear from a Florida State and Clemson point of view of what would happen if they lost in court, right? Because, if Florida State and Clemson, if they lose in court, if they cannot prove that the grant of rights is breakable or flawed, then they could potentially be stuck until 2036 with a revenue model that does not give them favoritism, right? That's a big risk. Right. From an ACC point of view, if the ACC was so sure that the grant of rights was ironclad, why give up an inch? Why give up anything? Like, if you're so sure that your document is unbreakable, why not just say, you know what? We've got you guys here held hostage till 2036. So obviously there has to be some concern on both sides that there is a chance this does not go our way in court. And I want to say something else on this, Kenton, because I see some folks out there, and most of like the actual write-ups. I mentioned the one from Ross Dellinger on Yahoo. I was reading some write-ups on from the Tallahassee newspaper, from a newspaper in North Carolina. The actual stories explain it very well, but a lot of people don't read like actual news stories. They read, they read tweets and Facebook posts and whatever. So I see this is being kind of reported and passed along by a lot of people saying, well, the ACC is agreeing to pay Florida State and Clemson more than the other schools. That's not exactly what it is. Like, and yes, Florida State and Clemson have been the top ratings schools for the past several years in the ACC. So those have tended to be the universities that bring the most eyes to the set. So theoretically, they would get paid the most. But at the same time, every school in the ACC would have the same opportunity. All 17 would have the same opportunity. And you've got some programs that seem to be on the rise right now, like Louisville and Miami. So you get an opportunity, your teams get better, you get more eyes on the set, you have an opportunity to make a higher share of revenue. Because honestly, I know not everybody likes this because it's not the way college sports have been traditionally done. But when you're talking about distributing money from a television contract, doesn't it make sense to distribute television money based on how many people watch these teams on television? Like, I don't think it's a ridiculous concept to say that if more people watch your games, you make more money.
Yeah, and beyond that, first of all, that's the most American thing there is, right? The based on your own merit, what you do, all that good stuff. It fits in with the concept and the belief of what this country is supposed to be founded upon and built upon. But let's go a little deeper for a second. In a good compromise, or as the old saying goes, if nobody's happy, it's a great compromise. If everybody is happy, you talked about the idea of both sides having to give up something. Both sides are having to give up a lot here. But again, it is all dependent and hinges on, will Florida State and Clemson honor it? That's the most important thing about this whole deal to me, because it seems to me, like you said, both sides are giving something up. But what do both sides give up if the other side's like, yeah, actually, I know I said I'd give it up. I had my fingers crossed behind my back the whole time. Here's my lawyer. We'll see you in court, buddy. That is very much so a part of this. And so, a lot like the other conferences that said, hey, these have been disruptive partners. Well, imagine the person that's actually the partner being disrupted. Imagine how they feel. So, I look at these proposals and I say, this is the ACC absolutely acting in good faith, despite them not receiving that same treatment in kind at times from these two universities.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, when we come back, I want to talk about, because like you can make an argument that Florida State and Clemson could quote unquote win here, being able to access more revenue, that the ACC as a whole could win here, being able to keep, their two of their biggest brands in the conference for an extra handful of years. But not everybody would win. And would this proposal actually pass? Because it would require a vote. We'll talk about the obstacles when we return. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We are only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. And folks, we're only getting started with eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And folks, eBay Motors has helped me out with my vehicle so many different times. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, check out our other shows. Kenton and Grayson do an awesome job on Locked On Wolfpack. I host Locked On Canes. So between NC State Wolfpack, Miami Hurricanes, we have you covered on our other shows as well. And thank you for joining us here on Locked On ACC. So, all right, Kenton, again, this is all very preliminary stuff. So like somebody leaked this to the media because they want to throw this idea out there, whether that came from the ACC side or it might have even come from one of the other schools within the ACC who aren't directly involved in these lawsuits, or maybe it came from Florida State or Clemson. But
maybe that was Adrian Wojnarowski's real last Woj bomb because he didn't want it to be Okoro re-signing with the Cavs. Maybe he said, I'm going to drop something real on you, something substantive, even if I do it from the shop.
The old Woj bomb. But so here's the thing. Like for this settlement, like this wouldn't just be a matter of Jim Phillips and the ADs from Florida State and Clemson get into a room and they sign this into law. You're going to have a vote of all of the, I don't know where Notre Dame, I assume Notre Dame would get a vote as well, even though they're not a football member. So you would either have to have a 2/3 majority of whether it be 17 or the full 18 members of the ACC. And I think that basketball would be involved in this as well. So Notre Dame would probably get a vote, but 2/3 would have to pass this, Kenton. And would you really have 2/3 support? Because, okay, it might be for the greater good. Like if you can keep the band together for an extra, 6 years from right now, would Wake Forest and Boston College, would they say, you know what, even if we have to give up money, because we're probably not the teams that are going to bring the most eyeballs to the set, we would have to give up money, but for the greater good of the conference? Or would some of these lesser revenue schools look at it and say, well, hold on, we had it really good. We were making an even split before. And like, okay, we agreed for this success initiative where if you win on the field, you get extra money. But now they're telling me we're just going to be giving extra money to the schools that get the biggest TV ratings. Like, do you think you'd be able to guarantee the votes of 2/3?
Absolutely not. Anybody who could tell you they could guarantee that this thing gets to 2/3 is a lie and a half. Humans are interesting. There are all these different thoughts and ideas going into this because there are going to be some small schools that are like, listen, as long as we can keep this thing together, I don't want to go to the American Conference. I don't want to go to the Sun Belt. I'll do what I got to do to make it work here. But there are other small schools that are going to say, to hell with you and to hell with that. I don't give a damn what you got going on. We've already bended the knee and bowed the head and said, hey, we'll make it by performance, even though y'all are in a position to where you are so much better than us. We will give you, if you win, the money will come. We will give you the field of dreams, carte blanche of money here. With that being said, I don't know how much more I can bend, how much more I can take, because if I continue to bend, what happens? It's the old saying in my community, if you give them an inch, they take a mile. And at this point in time, you may not be at a full mile. You're pretty close to a kilometer, if you ask me. You're pretty close. Yeah. You're getting right up on it.
Here's another something I'd like us to think about here. If this settlement does end up passing, and what is being reported here is the ACC would create a new revenue model where part of their TV money from ESPN, extra money would be distributed to the top TV ratings draws, right? Which would reportedly maybe be enough to keep Florida State and Clemson happy enough to drop their lawsuits. And in return, ESPN would actually the ACC would shorten their grant of rights to run up in 2030. So in 6 years, anybody could become a free agent, right? So if that were to come to pass, Kenton, who do you think the media and the fans would paint as the loser? Would they paint the ACC as being the loser, or they would probably paint Florida State and Clemson as being the losers, right? Because all these reports that, hey, they can get out maybe by 2026, 2025. Now they're stuck till 2030. I don't necessarily think there would be a big loser, but it wouldn't stop people from painting it that way.
The loser would be whichever side you oppose. Donald, you and I talked earlier about a certain somebody on Twitter who just keeps pivoting. They had all these ideas. I know that this is going to happen on this date. And then what happened when that day passed? Oh, they just kind of quietly go past it. And, well, I know now that this is going to happen on it. And then they're wrong again, and they just kind of roll past it. You've seen our comments, Dono. You've seen people screaming at us. There's no way that Clemson or Florida State plays another game in the ACC. Now, granted, I understand what Florida State is doing right now is not exactly playing football. I get it. You know, they're going out there and attempting more so than playing, but that's neither here nor there. They're still technically playing the game. So with that being said, we were right there. And did those people come back and say, hey, Dono, hey, Gibbs, you were right. My bad. I was wrong. No. That's the nature of the world now. Instead of finding information that's the right information, it's just a double down society. It's just well, if I was wrong, then I'm going to double my wrongness by saying that I'm going to be right. And you know, everything is thrown through a spin cycle of, hey, my side won because my side is right because there is something that my side did better than your side in whatever which way this happens. And I mean, it kind of is what it is at this point, just watching all of these things happen in terms of you know, who is saying what or who believes what side won. I don't think that there will be a public consensus about anything, the same way that I don't think that there will ever be a public consensus about, hey, all Americans agree that this thing should be legal or this thing should be illegal. This thing is good or this thing is bad. It just doesn't work that way.
I want to talk about some of the games this weekend. And why don't we start with, you know, one of the teams that's suing the ACC right now. Will the Florida State Seminoles get their first win of the season? They are favored by 2.5 points at home against Cal. By the way, as a side note on this, you can't, obviously Florida State Cal is not a rivalry, but Cal, I feel like on social media, they're creating rivalries with the rest of the conference, and I love it. Our good friend of the show, Lawrence Ross, has often told us, you guys need to get acquainted with Cal Twitter. They call themselves the Calgorithm.
The Calgorithm, baby. Yeah.
The memes that they produce. So have you seen like Cal, you know, obviously, you know, you have those stereotypes about Northern California and the political inclinations. You have the stereotypes about, you know, rural panhandle Florida and about the political inclinations. I love what the Calgorithm has been doing. They keep referring to Doak Campbell Stadium as woke Campbell Stadium. They're going to turn it into woke Campbell Stadium on Saturday.
Woo.
Oh man,
it's hilarious.
I mean, I think, you know, Florida State has not played to their talent level so far this year. So, and I think that's what the wise guys are like banking on, that at some point they're going to play to their talent level and they're going to win again. That's why they keep getting favored every week. But based on what we've seen on the field this year, Kenton, Cal's going to win this game, right?
Based on what we've seen on the field so far, that's true. However, at some point in time, you got to get some pride about yourself. You got to get some pride about yourself. Cal is traveling a long way. You know, and a home field advantage is normally what, a 3-point swing? So if they're favored by 2.5, the Sharps are saying this is basically a push. They're saying, hey, this is, all things considered. You know. So, I mean, I will say this. The luster is losing off of the spear daily. The gold helmets are losing shine every day. And when I tell you there's not enough oil, never mind, we're not going to go to that. But there is shine and luster being lost off those helmets. And after this game, if they lose to Cal as well, I don't think they'll be favored again until they play an FCS or a Group of 5 school. Because, I mean, you kind of can't, right? Like after 4 straight times, fool me one time, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't get fooled again. Fool me 3, 4, 5, you got to be the biggest damn fool I done seen. So I highly doubt that they'll be favored in the game again if they lose to Cal here. But it is a very real reality that they lose to Cal here, because the same way that you talk about Florida State not hitting their potential as a team, you know who else hasn't hit his potential all season? Jay Knott. He hasn't played a game where you're like, oh, that's that guy that was one of the leading rushers in the nation last year. That's the guy that if he's even, he's leaving. He makes one cut and he goes. So, you know, all in all, I think that this game, I won't say it'll teach us a lot about the conference, but I look forward to so many aspects of this game. Do Florida State fans go find No 1, 2, 3 and say, you have to end the curse if they lose this game? Does Jay not pop out and say, hey, this is who I am in order for Cal to win this game? Does the Calgorithm get even crazier? Because at that point, Cal will be undefeated at what, 3-0 or 4-0? I mean, does the Calgorithm get even crazier saying, we've gone through a third of the season, ain't lost a ball game yet? I want to see this, but also I want to see what happens if Florida State wins. Part of me wants to see, does Florida State figure it out? Do they circle the wagons and get where they need to go? Does Cal kind of have that moment of brought back down to earth? What happens if either team wins this game will be very intriguing to me.
Maybe if Florida State wins, they get their swagger back. Their AD, Michael Alford, he takes that piece of paper from the ACC, he rips it to shreds. We're not settling. We're out. We're out. We're back, baby.
Real WWE style right there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There are some big spreads in some non-conference games this week. Even a pretty big spread in a conference clash. Which teams are on upset alert in the Atlantic Coast Conference? You want to keep it locked right here. Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs with you on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. And I already know you're keeping it locked to FanDuel. Folks, we've been having so much fun. We've been winning money this college football season. NFL season is upon us as well. And yeah, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We have something a little different for you for the next couple of days. Guys, you want to make sure you take advantage of this if you haven't already. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com. Download America's #1 sportsbook. And speaking of FanDuel, we want to talk about some of these big under. And by the way, I feel like you can remember Kenton a few weeks ago. You had like a fly that kept like flying. I've had the last couple days. I've had this like pesky fly. I can't seem to get. Who keeps You're
I don't know what the hell is up with these flies, man. It's so. It's like I've cleaned this place from top to bottom. Everything is spotless. I'm not leaving no food. You know, it's a mess. It's a mess. It is the big Florida State media trying to silence us.
That's right.
It is big nose media. It is nose 321 because we have acknowledged that he must break the curse more than almost any other show, and they're trying to silence us. But we will not be silenced despite your pesky gnat spies. We will not be silenced.
So I'm looking at some of the FanDuel odds for games involving ACC teams this weekend. And okay, this one's not even a big spread here, Kenton, but I'm wondering about an upset alert for 2-1 Virginia, 2.5-point favorites at Coastal Carolina. Are they on upset alert this week?
I would say no, because Tim Beck is the head coach at Coastal Carolina. Now, I know that I have levied some slander at Bill O'Brien, but I have not had the displeasure of covering Bill O'Brien for an entire season, focusing on just his team and how they're doing. However, I have had multiple seasons of watching Tim Beck be I'm not a head coach, an offensive coordinator with NC State. And I can tell you right now, there is not a world in which he is the reason that I make the joke. If I could fail forward in dating the same way that he has failed forward in the job market, me and Meg Thee Stallion's wedding would be in a couple days, because I am telling you, I don't understand what he's saying in these interviews. I do not get it at all, but somehow he has talked those folks into making him a head coach. Anthony Calandria, come on down, brother. Have yourself a day. Be amazing. Fields, go out there and be the big body receiver you are. Malachi Fields, you know what I'm talking about. You better go up there and make the catches that you need to make. You better be the baddest brother on that field that day. I am telling you, I have full faith in Tony Elliott and crew in this one.
Miami, they go on the road to USF. At USF, they gave Alabama some problems a couple of weeks ago. Hurricanes are 17-point favorites, Kenton. And I think that goes to show, I guess, how highly the bettors feel about Miami. Now, I'm a little torn on how I feel about that spread heading into it, because it is a big number. I know a lot of people are going to look at that and say, hey, look at how tough USF played Alabama. That was in Tuscaloosa. They're at home. They can keep it really close. At the same time, I watched that game back, and Alabama had untimely turnovers and penalties that negated first downs, and they eventually pulled away in the fourth quarter. So if Miami can take care of the football, I think Miami can cover that 17-point spread with Cam Ward and company. I'm probably going to stay away from it. And obviously, I cover Miami and I back Miami, so there's some emotions that come into play. But I don't think I'm going to take Miami minus 17. I'm just going to watch and enjoy. But I can definitely see Miami covering that big spread as long as they don't cough the football up.
You're absolutely right there. And the biggest question that you have to have if you are looking at this game from that standpoint of, oh, well, Bama, they played Bama close. They played Bama close. Do y'all realize Nick Saban is not walking through that door? Y'all do realize that, right? Like, we are all on the same page there, right? We are all on the same page that Caleb Downs was one of the best, not safeties, players in the nation. He is. I'm sorry to tell y'all, that's just who that young man is. And I'm pretty sure Caleb's in Columbus now, ain't he? He's not going to be registering any snaps in that game or in any other game that Bama's going to be playing this year. I'm telling you right now, that is a very, very different Bama team. And I don't think that USF team will be able to hang in 2 games straight where it's like, hey, you've got big time opponents where, you're going to be battling and scraping and trying to hang on for your life. I think Miami covers. But with that being said, I'm like Dono, y'all know me. I'm not a bettor, so I generally stay away from it. But even if I turned on my betting mind and said, would I feel comfortable activating this one? Not necessarily.
I think this is more one of those games you kind of see how the first quarter goes, and maybe you make a live bet. Like, yes, yeah. I don't know. And then, okay, I think I might be buying this one. Another huge number. The Pitt Panthers are at home. Now, typically, they've been coming from behind to win games in dramatic fashion. I don't know if they're going to have to do that against 1-2 Youngstown State at home. But Pitt they're 25.5-point favorites, Kenton. That's a very big number, but they found themselves a quarterback. This is a team that's been learning how to win. They're already almost equaled their win total of all of last season. They can do that if they win this Saturday. So I don't know, 25.5 points. Are you buying that for Pitt, or are you saying, hey, Youngstown could at least cover?
I'm buying it for Pitt. They're feeling good. They're rolling. And here's the deal. While they have gone to sleep and come back against some pretty good teams so far this year, the reality is I don't think Narduzzi is going to allow that to become a consistent habit amongst this team. There are certain things that I'm like, hey, that's a Narduzzi habit, right? Defensive backs getting untimely penalties, and that's kind of a Narduzzi thing. It's kind of part built in to the Narduzzi experience. But with that being said, I really and truly don't believe that these uncharacteristically slow starts are going to be a part of that experience as well, especially not against Youngstown State. I think this team knows, hey, get right, church, and let's go home. Get your starters out early. You got to dominate, and I think they cover.
Now, how about this is not a big number, but how about the grudge match that is TCU at SMU? SMU's been a little disappointing this year. They're actually 3-point underdogs against their essentially crosstown rivals, and like the local politicians are getting into this action as well. Let me see if I can pull this up. So the Dallas mayor, so he's in Dallas proper, Eric Johnson. He is supporting SMU. He's wearing a TCU sucks t-shirt at the Wednesday City Council meeting, and it's because TCU decided to pause the SMU-TCU rivalry after the 2025 game. They're going to be playing for the 103rd all-time this Saturday. That from Brett McMurphy of Action Network. So you got to love it. You show up to the City Council meeting. TCU sucks. I kind of like that for the Dallas mayor.
Oh, absolutely. You better show your team spirit. You better tell them folks, listen, we don't talk about politics on this show, but what we do talk about is some good old, clean, old-fashioned hate. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
And let me tell you something. In the words of Kendrick Lamar, it's about love and hate. And let me tell you, I'm the biggest hater. And I love to see SMU in the city of Dallas playing into the biggest hater role. Say, you know what, Fort Worth? You're not worth it. You're a second city. You're a second city. You know what a second city is? Minneapolis, St. Paul, second city. Raleigh-Durham, you're a second city. Dallas-Fort Worth, you're a second-rate city, buddy. You're close, but you're not quite us. And I don't like it. We can go out back about it. I love to see that energy from the mayor of Dallas here. Kudos to him. What a time.
I love it as well. Well, that's going to be another interesting game to watch this weekend. TCU is favored by 3 at SMU. Had a great time, as always, here with Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Dono from Locked On Canes. And by the way, we were talking about this proposed settlement between the ACC, Florida State, and Clemson. We're going to be talking with Rohan Law. Doug Rohan is going to join us. I think it's going to be for Tuesday's episode. Doug is going to join us and he has a law degree. You and I do not, so he can break this down in much more complex terms, and Doug does a great job with that. So we'll talk to you guys again next week on another episode of Locked On ACC. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.